I love this. So even simple things, you can do a lot with that.
I can start this one around.
Okay, let's do that one. So Annie's starting this one here. Okay, and it just was oh great. I have to see myself. Just leave it as it is.
Leave it as is.
Okay.
It is live right now.
Okay.
So we're not gonna mess with it anymore right now.
Okay.
But this should automatically pick up whatever you have up on the screen, and it should be you. So this is what they'll see.
Okay, is this live, like, out to the everywhere?
To YouTube, yes.
So
Should I say just for testing this if your prayers? Okay. So Brady, so if I move over here, that's okay. They just don't see me. Okay. That's good. Okay. So I appreciate all you working with us as we get this up and going. There's always new things as we go. Our goal here, and I just told Brady about this about 45 minutes ago, so he's been really good getting this going. Our goal is, this is live streamed right now. He got this connected very fast, but our goal is to not have prayers live streamed. Okay, so our goal is to have this where we say our prayers that are for us right here, right now, that are stay in this room, and then start the live stream for the lesson. But excuse me, but as it is today, it's just going right now. So keep that in mind for prayers today. Okay, so general and whoever might be watching this. So hopefully, anyway. So I guess it's both. It's live streamed and then it goes and becomes recorded. So yeah, whatever. So let's see. Tara, she said she was going to come in, but she may have gotten tied up. So she's our meal coordinator, and we're giving meals to Hope. She has had her ankle sprained or broke for a long time, and then she broke her leg. So we're taking meals to her. But Tara said that she lives somewhere that's way out, and that there's no cell reception, and it's not plowed, and so some people have had difficulty getting her meals, and so. One of the things that's suggested is if you want to help with that, bring freezer meals, because her husband can pick them up here at church on Sunday and take, 3 casseroles home and a couple loaves of, bread or something and a pie, whatever, and that's the meal. And so if you want to help with that, talk to Tara, because she's kind of shifting the way she's taking meals to Hope, and they would be freezer type meals. So Carol and Hope, we can continue to pray for her healing. Yes.
Question on the meals. What's the standard servings to go over the phone? I asked that too.
Okay, so I hadn't heard that. And so if you want to get further details, it's with Tara. Tara knows all that. All right, what else is going on?
So just continue praying for my family. My aunt was she had surgery. We did her appendix taken out. She had careful surgery, and also just be with my family as they're going through.
Your extended family, okay, yeah, your big family, okay, and
family here in Alaska and family down south.
Okay, lots of stuff. All right. Yes, Dana. Yeah, she's been for quite a while. Okay. Sister Judy. All right, let's go to God in prayer. Dear God, thank you so much for loving us and the grace that you give us and the goodness and the mercy and the tender care. I think of how magnificent you are and how magnificent your creation is and the power that's involved in all that. And along with that power comes tender compassion. And I'm so thankful for that. And Lord, I know that you care about every need of ours. And I'm so thankful that you do. Lord, right now we lift up our sister Carol, who's been sick for a long time. I just pray that you will heal her, that you will give her comfort, that she can enjoy a few days of being healthy before she goes in for surgery. And Lord, I know you're right there with her. I know you're right beside her and holding her, and I thank you for that. And I pray that you continue to show her your peace and your path each minute of the day and each day. And I just pray for her whole family that this not only affects one person, it affects so many people around. And I just pray that you'll give them strength to help her through this, and guidance and love. And Lord, I pray that the surgery will be able to go through on Thursday, and that it will be effective, and that she will heal quickly and be able to be back to the work that you have for her. But most of all, Lord, I pray that Carol and the people around her will grow stronger to you, grow closer to you through this. And Lord, I pray for Hope, that as she heals, that you draw her close to you as well, and that you will heal her leg quickly, and that it'll be healed in a way that won't have lasting implications, and that she'll be able to move on with her life in the way that you want to bless her in her life. And Lord, I pray for all the people who are tending to the needs of these women and so many other women who aren't mentioned. I just thank you for them. I thank you for their hearts, and I thank you for the work they've put into it. And I pray that you continue to bless them, give them strength to be able to continue that work. And Lord, I pray for Christy's family, that her aunt is going into surgery. I pray that you will be with the doctors who will be performing that surgery, and that you will guide them and give them wisdom and knowledge to make the surgery successful. And I pray that you will just guide her whole family who's going through different struggles, different things going on, that they'll clearly look to you and to see your path in front of them. And then I pray for Dana's sister Jody, who's been fighting a sickness for quite a few weeks now. I just pray that you'll give her answers to know what will help her. And I pray that you will, during this time when she's has to slow down a little bit, that she'll draw closer to you. And I pray that you'll give Dana encouragement to be able to encourage her mom and her sister through these sicknesses. Lord, I pray for our hearts now as we open your word. I pray that you will show us your word, show us what you want in our lives, and that we can draw closer to you through our study today. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, ladies, you want to hear it? How you're going to remember your memory verses? First it was, okay, here's the master. I'm getting organized. This is the master. If you haven't gotten them all, you can look to this to get it organized. First, it was the verses. What are those? And Ephesians. Then it was Thelp. We've got a lot of verses to remember. Thessalonians, Ephesians, and Psalms. Good job. And then it was that. Then there were 3 P's. So it was. Well, now we have 5 P's. You can't just keep saying all the way through. But it is Psalms, Peter, Psalms, Proverbs, Proverbs. And you know how music goes, da 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 da. It's always a 5 beat, da 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 da. That's how these are. It's Psalms, Peter, Psalms, Proverbs, Proverbs. Psalms, Peter, Psalms, Proverbs, Proverbs. So that's where we're at now. The Psalm, Psalms, Peter, Psalms, Proverbs, Proverbs. So now I got you to remember in the books. We just have to remember where they're at and what they say. So I'm taking this as a challenge, and if any of you guys want to do it with me, let me know, and we can encourage each other and see if we can get these, memorizing these verses. So this is our one today. Proverbs 3:6. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Last week we started talking about Hebrews, and where in Hebrews God is talking about the time when he was taking his people, the Israelites. He'd just taken them out of Egypt, and he's bringing them into the land he wanted them. But this shows what they did. They didn't listen to him. They hardened their hearts. They rebelled. They turned away from him. And at the end it says because of that they didn't enter his rest. And that's where we're going to pick up and talk about more about that today. And I want us to see what the flow is of this verse. It really begins with the day of testing. This whole thing in Hebrews, what he's talking about, it begins with testing. God was testing his people. And then the deceitfulness of sin came in. And from the deceitfulness of sin caused all these things to happen with the Israelites. Their hearts became hard. They didn't believe God. They turned away from his ways. They didn't follow his ways. They were disobedient. And all of that caused them to fall away from the living God. And that word living is very important. This isn't a God who just sets things in motion. This was a God who was living in their lives, who was active, who was right there with them. And they turned away from that because of the sin and the hardening of their hearts. And then at the end, it says they didn't enter my rest because of their unbelief. And I really want to talk about the deceitfulness of sin and what it does in our lives and how it comes into our lives and what it causes. Because here we can see, when you just read those words, those are hard words. An evil heart, a hardening of the heart, and all of that. But I think before we talk about that, we need to go up and see where it begins. And it really begins with testing. That's where all of this started, was with the testing. Whenever we're tested, we always have a choice. We can choose, and it doesn't matter what the test is. In this situation that God had his people in, he said it was a test. He said he was testing his people. We know in Job, it was a test. God tested Job. He said, you can test Job's faith. It may not be a test. It may just be how life is, the path that God has put us on in life. And that's how it was for Joseph. Joseph was put in situations that we wouldn't necessarily say were a test, specifically given by God, but they were a situation where he had to choose as if it were a test. It could be a discipline from God. It could be God refining us. And it could be just how life is from a consequence of our actions. But whatever it is, we can just put it in this category of a test. And when we're in this situation, when we're in this challenge and we're under pressure, we have a choice. Are we going to obey God and see his abundance? Or are we going to be deceived by sin and then harden our hearts towards God and rebel against God's ways? And you can see that the words that God used is that when we're deceived by sin, the hardening, the rebelling, the sinning, the evil ways, that's where it takes us when we choose that path. And ultimately, it makes it to where we can't see God's abundance. The people who chose when God had them going into the promised land, they didn't get to see God's abundance. I want us to keep these words in mind of these paths, because when we're tested, if we choose the path of obedience, that's a path of faith. It's directly a path of faith. And the other way is learning about our own understanding. It's a path that we can say, I know what's going to happen here. If we choose God's way, it's based on the truth. It's based on the truth of God's word. And the other way is based on deceit. It's based on Satan's trickery and manipulation and lies. Choosing God's way is obedience, and the other way is disobedience. And God's way is abundance, and the other is missing the abundance. I think when we can get these words in our minds of faith, truth, obedience, those go together in abundance. And the other, the evil, the sin, the rebelling, the deceit, that leads us to missing it. And just a side note about this, when we're in this test, is these are cyclical type of situations. When we step out in faith, when we're being tested, and ultimately we see God coming through, we see his abundance, that bolsters our faith. The next time we're up against that, we say, I know God has this because he just took care of this, and we're strengthened, and it's like a snowball. It gets bigger and bigger, and you say, yes, I know I can trust God because I saw it. So the next time you're in that testing, it might be a little worse, but you can say, I know. Well, the same goes for the other side. If you rebel against God and you turn your heart away from him and you're deceived by sin and you don't see God's abundance, it's so easy to say, yeah, I knew God wouldn't come through. I knew it. And so the next time it happens, you're going to not have as much motivation to trust in God. And then again, you don't see him working in your lives. So this isn't just a one-time thing. They build on each other, and it strengthens, and it strengthens it in the good, and it also strengthens it in the bad. Now we're going to talk about these paths later, but right now I just want to talk about the testing, the test that these Israelites were put into. Turn to Numbers 13. We were here last week, but this is really where our lesson is for the next couple weeks, is how God tested his people when he pulled them out of Egypt. And this was probably only a few days, maybe a few weeks, but we're talking days here, not months and years. He had pulled them out of slavery. He had pulled them through the Red Sea. He had taken them there, and he was going to take them straight in to his promised land. There was no plan of stopping in the desert for 40 years. So this is just days. They had seen God's glory, his abundance. They had seen the power at work in their lives. They saw what he did to Pharaoh. They saw the Red Sea open up. They saw God give them the water when they needed it. They knew the strength of God. And now when God sends them in, he sends 12 people into the land. And he says, I want you to go spy it out. And he wanted them to see the land. He didn't really need to send them in on a reconnaissance mission. The land which we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. We mentioned this just a little bit last week, but this was milk and honey and fruit, pomegranates and figs, exceedingly good land. They had yogurt, they had berry yogurt, they had milk. Can you imagine the feast, the bread? When I think of the land, there was wheat flowing and wheat fields and mace. And the grape, they had juice. It was abundant. God didn't just say, I'm going to let you survive. I'll let you survive on water and bread. He didn't. He gave them so much. And he wanted them to see it. He wanted them to see, this is the land. And I often think, how does a land flow with milk? I'm thinking there had to have been cows there. There were cows, or there were goats or something, We just drink cow and goat's milk. Maybe they had other type of milk. but this was rich. He already had this right there for them, ready for them when they went in there. And when we think about how God wants to bless our lives, if we look to how he wanted to bless the Israelites, it was a lot more than just the bare minimum. He gave them good things, really, really good things. And he says it's exceedingly good that he wanted to give it. And what's amazing is he wanted his people to see that. He wanted them to see, you guys, you know what I'm going to give you. And that's important. Let's see. Brady also told me why I lose my mouse. It goes over to that screen. He said if you just drag it back here, you'll get it on your screen. So I probably will never lose my mouse again. I didn't realize that was a screen. That he says, I want to give this to you. This is important. Sometimes we think if I'm strong enough, if I'm smart enough, if I'm talented enough, if I can work things good enough, then I can have all the good things of life. God says, I want to give those to you. It's nothing you're going to earn. I didn't want to give you this abundance because you are so good and you're so great. He said, this is a gift from me, just to my children, to my people, because I love you. And I want us to keep that in mind because we as a people, maybe it's just me, but I think we as a people tend to rely on our own strength. If I can do it, if I can be strong enough and talented enough and do all this, then I'll have it. And that's not how it was with God and his people. Remember the word but? But first, he said, I'm going to give you a test. He said, you see this, you see the abundance, but I'm going to test you. And he put them in what I like to call a no-way situation. He put them into a position where there was no way. There was no way they were going to take over that land by themselves. There was no question about it. And when he went in and he sent his people in and told them to look at it and see the goodness of it, he also made sure that they saw how there was no way they were doing it on their own. And just as a side note, God often puts us in these no-way situations. They had been in a lot of them in the last few weeks. When they were in Egypt as slaves, even though they were numerous, there was no way they were going to be escaping out of Egypt on their own. And if there had been a way, they probably would have done it. But they couldn't. And then when they were pinned between their dreaded enemy and the vast Red Sea, there was no way they were escaping that. No way. It had to be God. And again, they're put in that situation. This is very important to me in my life because often I'm in those no-way situations. And I think, how can this be? Why am I in this? Why would God want me in a situation like this? And when I go back and see, this is how he's put his people in forever. This is how he's dealt with his people. It gives me encouragement. It gives me strength to know because it's him. It's his abundance, his strength, his power, not me. And what was their no way situation? And so, I want to say Melissa, but Ronnie read this for us in Numbers 13:28. First they said, the land is abundant, it's flowing with milk and honey. And then right after they said that, they said, however. That's the same thing as but. And the but or the however usually is what's emphasized. Like, yeah, it's good. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. And besides that, the descendants of Anak are there. They made sure to put that in there. And in Numbers 13:33, it says, somebody read that, 13:33.
You saw that they're the descendants of Anak came from the Philistines. You seem like grasshoppers in their own eyes, and you look the same to them.
Thanks, Christy. Yes. And then in Amos 2:9, when God is talking about this situation, he said, "Yet it was I who destroyed the Amorite before them, whose height was like the height of cedars, and who was strong as the oaks." So in these verses, when God sent them into the land, he says, I want you to see what's here. I want you to see what I'm providing. And he also was telling them, I want you to see what I'm going to take down to give you that land. And when they say, we are like grasshoppers compared to the Anakim, and they said, it's not just us. We're not the only ones that think that. They think it too. And it makes me wonder, how did they know that the Anakim people saw them as grasshoppers? That when they went in there, that those giants kind of sneer at them and say that? But it was understanding between both the Israelites and those people that the Israelites were like grasshoppers. And God says those people were as tall as cedars, and they were as strong as oaks. Do you guys see my little grasshopper? So I had to make him quite massive because he would even show up. And so if I made that grasshopper really the size he should be compared to that oak, you wouldn't see him, right? He would get lost in the blades of grass. Oak trees, when you think of oak trees, what do you think of? The word massive comes to my mind. Their trunk is massive. Their branches are massive. They're just massive, and they're strong. You know, oak is a strong wood, not just the tree, like the physical, but the actual wood, the fibers is strong. So God says these people were massive. They were strong. They were solid. And they were tall. Cedar trees are tall, aren't they? So you never know how much you read on the internet, how much is true or not, and I didn't feel like getting down a rabbit trail because I had other things to do. But there's some things where people say, you know, they found some bones where these people could be 30 feet high. Now, again, I don't know. I didn't research that. But when you see how God describes them, remember, Goliath was from the people of Anak. And he was probably, maybe 9 feet high, and he was big. But some people say that the people the descendants of Anak, the Anakim, they could have been 20, 30 feet high. They're huge people. And that makes sense when the Israelites describe themselves as grasshoppers. You know, when I'm around somebody who's tall, I may describe myself, I look like a kid to them, but I never say a grasshopper. You know, I never feel quite like a grasshopper. But I just can't imagine. What's this ceiling? Probably 9, 10 foot ceilings. That would make sense. Double the height of this. These, however high they were massive. These are humongous people. This is the no way situation. It didn't matter. The Israelites were not trained warriors. They had come out. They were a band of slaves that had come out. They weren't warriors. They didn't have spears. They didn't have all of that. And even if they had been trained strong warriors, they couldn't have fought these people. Their cities were fortified. You see the picture of that city there? We don't live in areas where there's fortified walls, but these had to have been massive, huge walls, especially if huge people build them. You know, there was no way they were going to penetrate into those cities. And God wanted them to see that. He wanted them to see that these people were tall and that he was working in this situation. Let's see. God wanted them to know that if they relied on their strength, they would be destroyed. And I want that to sink in because it was true. If God had said, you go fight these people, it would have meant certain death for them. And not a death of dreams, not a death of, something. This was a physical death. those people would have absolutely destroyed them. And what God did when he took them in was very, very deliberate. If he had wanted to, he could have sent those descendants of Anak out. He could have made them all disappear. He could have had them all killed. He was going to do that. He could have done it before his people went in there. He could have routed them a different way where they wouldn't have seen them, where they wouldn't have had to face that fear, and where they would have known that God was taking care of the situation. He didn't. It was very deliberate that he made them see how big these people were. He wanted them in that no way situation where they had to rely on faith. An absolute faith in who God was to step forward. And remember what faith is? Faith is taking action and believing God when we can't see. And in this situation, what we see is it's not only a taking action when we can't see, it kind of even goes to the other extreme of not seeing, but seeing how horrible it is. I know for me, when God says, I'll make your path straight, I'll make it good for you, I want God to make it good and flat and safe, and then I'll take a step. That's not how God works. And I'm sure that's how the Israelites wanted it. They said, okay, God, thanks for giving us the grapes and the honey. That's good. But let's have these people wiped out. Then we'll step in. He didn't. He said, I want you to step in there, and I want you to face that giant right here. We don't have the oak tree up. I want you to face that, and I want you to step there, and you to know I'm going to take care of that. Because I told you I would. Like I said, when God tells us to step, sometimes in front of us is these huge rocks and there's serpents everywhere. And we know, without a doubt, that if we take that step, we're doomed. And
Well, yeah, apps have popped up. I don't know if it's bogus or if it's genuine. Virus, that's the word I'm looking for.